Hello friends, I hope you are all doing well. I welcome you all to the class on the backward linkages of science and technology. As I have already informed you friends, the concept of backward linkage helps us to analyze what to study in the static area, and this gives us an edge in the static areas because we do a smart study before the prelims and specifically base our emphasis upon those things which were there in the news and things related to that. As there is a separate video that I have already made on what is the concept of backward linkage. Please have a look at that in case you have not done till today. Similarly friends, in this particular class today we are going to discuss the backward linkages for the month of May 2021. We have already discussed some issues in the classroom on the month of May 2021 issues, and we are going to focus our discussion only on the backward linkages of the same. In case any of you has not seen those classes, please download the Unacademy app and use my code Pavneet10 to unlock those free lectures. And for all those who have already seen those classes, let's get going and start with the backward linkages. Friends, just a small reminder, please keep a pen and paper with you so that whatever backward linkages we are talking about here, you make a note out of that and make sure that all these backward linkages are kept with you safely throughout the year on a monthly basis, so that when you do the revision of the preliminary exam in the month of February next year, all these backward linkages are there with you at one place. And such kind of backward linkages which are written by you on loose A4 sheets will not only aid your revision but will also help you to undertake a smarter study and thereby gain a strong edge in the preliminary examination over your competitors. So let's get going friends. The first issue that we talked about is the One Health approach. Now the One Health approach has basically gained prominence, as I told you in the class, primarily because of the COVID-19 issue. And in the One Health approach, I told you that we primarily try to study the interconnectedness of the plants, animals and humans within their shared environment. So some of the very prominent backward linkages friends are: number 1, the 12 Manhattan Principles. If you remember, I told you that the 12 Manhattan Principles were responsible to give One Health, One World approach, and these 12 principles focus on holistic prevention of the epidemics, diseases and the maintenance of ecosystems. So please make sure that you very thoroughly read about that. Similarly, also read about, apart from the COVID-19 as a virus, Ebola virus and a brief study about the Nipah virus. Primarily because most of these viruses have a zoonotic origin, and the One Health approach basically also is centered around the zoonotic analysis of the viruses which are there. So please make sure that you do have an understanding about that. Similarly friends, what I also need you to study here is, very importantly, India's One Health vision. The India's One Health vision is an important thing that you need to undertake a study of, because it derives its blueprint as part of the larger global initiative called the One Health, One World. And more importantly friends, I told you that in the year of 1980s, India had basically set up the National Committee on Zoonosis. And under this National Committee on Zoonosis, which was set up in the 1980s, in 2021 the government set up the Center for One Health in Nagpur. So please read about that very importantly friends. And also at the same time there is one more backward linkage here, which is a program of the Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying, and that is basically the National Animal Disease Control Program. Please make sure that you do have a basic study and a basic idea about the National Animal Disease Control Program. Similarly, at the same time friends, apart from this, you also need to undertake a very important study of the basics of two organizations here. Number 1 is the World Health Organization and number 2 is the Food and Agriculture Organization. As far as the FAO is concerned, please remember, as you may be already knowing, that it was established in 1945 and its larger objective is to primarily combat hunger improve nutrition, and food security. Similarly, at the same time, friends, when it comes to the WHO, it was established in 1948 to work with the UN system and coordinate with the UN to undertake surveillance and preparedness for tackling the health issues. You know, the UPSC can always give a question where they may not specifically refer to the years, but may just try to confuse you to see whether you have the appropriate knowledge or not. They may say that the WHO was created before the creation of the FAO. Such a statement obviously is wrong, because instead of testing directly upon the years, they can play with a fact like this. So these are some of the backward linkages, friends, that you need to keep in mind. So please keep a watch upon these and make sure that a basic idea about all these things are there in your mind as such. Now let's go to the second issue, friends. The government nod for the 5G trials permitted. So as I told you, friends, that the 5G technology and how is it different from the 4G technology. So this basic difference can be asked by the UPSC as a comparative question in the prelims. So they can give you a comparative analysis to undertake. So make sure that the basics of the 5G, 4G technologies are very thoroughly done by you. Second important fact, friends, is that what is the biggest advantage of 5G technology in India with respect to health, if we say, considering that health is one issue that has dominated the public discourse. So what is that one big thing with respect to health? That issue is basically the telemedicines. So once probably the 5G technology in India gets fully adopted, India can become a pioneer when it comes to telemedicines. And in fact, friends, if you remember in the India yearbook class, I already told you about the e-Sanjeevani program. The e-Sanjeevani program is something where we had basically discussed about the the telemedicine part, which had two components, if you remember, the doctor to doctor and the doctor to patient. So related to that, they can even ask you a question on the e-Sanjeevani this year or even next year in the prelims. Similarly, friends, the other important thing that you need to really study about is the very important body here, that is the International Telecommunication Union. So the International Telecommunication Union is a body that you really need to study here, and studying of that body will help you to understand the larger nuances of the 5G networks. But friends, very importantly, with respect to the 5G trials that the government has permitted, if you remember in the class, I told you that it is going to happen on the 5G platform, and that has been basically developed by an important body, which is also one of the backward linkages here. That is the Center of Excellence in Wireless Technology. So it is an autonomous research society, as you know, under the IIT Madras. So being an autonomous research body under the IIT Madras, its aim is basically to provide technological leadership to the Indian wireless industry and also address the needs of the Indian market through the R&D. Similarly, the 5G technology trials that have happened here have basically missed the Chinese. So the Chinese companies were basically not given any kind of permission to go for it, and the DOT basically, which is the Department of Telecom, that also should be remembered as one of the backward linkages here, friends, that the Department of Telecom very clearly had stated that they did not prohibit the Chinese from undertaking any kind of test, but the Chinese basically never came out with the request for testing as such. So we have discussed that in the class. So just make sure that that particular issue is there in your mind. So it's not out of any animosity with China that we have deliberately tried to avoid them. But it's just that, we never received any applications from them, and the government expedited the trial without their applications coming yet. Now, if you look at the issue number 3, that is the important drug for COVID-19, that is the 2DG, that is also known as the 2-deoxy-D-glucose drug. It is basically, as you know, a drug that can be consumed orally. It's in a powder form, and it is a very promising drug, friends, because it has been basically established with the larger objective of preventing the spread of the COVID-19 to the rural areas. because in the rural areas, considering that we do not have an adequate health infrastructure as of now, this drug can be very effective there. Similarly, friends, as I told you in the class also, that the consumption of this drug is very beneficial primarily for the simple reason that when it comes to this specific drug and on its consumption, it basically acts very fast on the virus within the body, and as a result of which basically prevents the need for the hospitalization of the patient, and also prevents the need for the patient to have critical access to oxygen, which was also relatively short in supply in the last few months. So some backward linkages, friends, is number one, a very important body, that is the Institute of Nuclear Medicine and Allied Sciences. The Institute of Nuclear Medicine and Allied Sciences. So this is basically a laboratory of the DRDO. So again, the second important thing, the Defense Research and Development Organization. The DRDO and its lab had basically developed this specific drug. So a basic idea about the Institute of Nuclear Medicine and Allied Sciences is very important, friends, that it has been very importantly, as you know, working in the area of radiation, neurocognitive imaging, and also chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear research. So based upon various non-invasive imaging techniques and neurocognitive and endocrine functions and the functional assessment of the human body, the drug has been developed by the Institute of Nuclear Medicine and the Allied Sciences. Similarly, friends, you also need to study here very basically about the Drug Controller of India. And when you talk about the Drug Controller of India, don't forget the fact that an automatic backward linkage in this regard becomes the Drug and the Cosmetics Act. So these are some of the basic backward linkages that emerge out of this particular issue. So this particular drug has been proven to be quite effective. A little more clinical trials and probably we are going to have a big launch of this drug as such to prevent the COVID-19 in the country. So a lot of people have been quite critical about India not playing a prominent role, but the kind of innovations we have shown to tackle COVID-19 is not something shown by any country in the world. After all, वो बाबा जी की कोरोनिल की गोली भी हमारे पास है, जिसके ऊपर बाबा जी ने मछलियों पर रिसर्च करी है उनको कोरोना का वायरस लगा के. So keeping that aside, the other backward linkage that you need to really work upon here is the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology. A brief question on this in the preliminary. See, these bodies in this regard are very important. So while the drug may be in the news and many students would be just preparing about, how the drug functions and, when you consume orally, how does it tackle the virus? The UPSC may act smartly and ask you questions on these bodies which are there, which hardly any student will pay attention to. So please make sure, friends, that as I told you, backward linkage is very important. So Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, established in 1977, as you know, is a premier research organization in the era of modern biology. And one of the very important objectives is that it undertakes a lot of research and promotes centralized national facilities for modern techniques in interdisciplinary areas of biology as such. So keep that in mind, friends. Issue number 4 is related to the unnatural origin of SARS. And the SARS means the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-19. And the new species of the man-made viruses as genetic bioweapons. So, there's a lot of debate, as I just told you, that whether the COVID-19 actually originated from the nature or it originated from the lab. China has been pushing the natural origin theory. China बोल रहा है कि नहीं वो लैब में था और वो चमगादड़ों को होता था, हम चमगादड़ का सूप पीते थे. भाई साहब तुम्हें पूरे जीवन में और किसी चीज़ का सूप बनाने को पीने को नहीं मिला. मतलब हमारे यहाँ पे आदमी जो है लौकी का सूप पीता है, तुम भाई साहब चमगादड़ का सूप पी रहे हो, यार कुछ शर्म कर लो. So China basically stuck with the natural origin theory only. But there has been a lot of evidence that has been picked up in the world today that, the COVID-19 virus could be a lab manufactured virus. So this debate has been going on very aggressively and a lot of findings have to be done and a lot of studies have to be done to identify whether there are lab origins for this or not. And if there are lab origins, then obviously it's going to be a serious cause of concern. Certain documents accessed by the US CIA and also by the Australian intelligence agencies have proven that the Chinese had been talking about, the COVID-19 virus, and they were already talking about how COVID-19 as a virus, or coronavirus for that matter, not COVID-19 per se, but the coronaviruses can be used as effective bioweapons. So all those documents that were accessed by the CIA, the Australian intelligence, etc., they have basically, trying to portray this lab origin theory. So in this regard, one of the very, in fact, friends, the important backward linkage here is the UN Bioweapons Convention. In the prelim exam, if a question comes on the UN Bioweapons Convention, don't be surprised, because that's one of the very easiest backward linkage that the UPSC can ask. So the UN Bioweapon Convention, as you know, was earlier called the Convention on the Prohibition of Development, Production and Stockpiling of the Biological and Toxic Weapons and on their destruction. So this convention, as you know, friends, was adopted on the 10th of April when it was opened for signatures, and in 1972, and finally came into force in 1975. So it was enforced from 1975 onwards. The Biological Weapon Convention prohibits the development, production, acquisition, transfer, stockpiling, and even use of the biological and toxic weapons. So it was one of the first multilateral disarmament treaties that banned basically an entire category of weapons of mass destruction. So for that matter, friends, if the COVID-19 is found to have any kind of lab origin, then obviously it's going to be a violation of the UN Bioweapon Convention, and automatically there are going to be serious concerns with respect to that. Unfortunately, with respect to China, friends, their facilities do not inspire global trust, because their facilities are too opaque. There are no transparency measures that have been taken. And also the reason why China, as I told you, has been pushing for the nature origin theory, which has also been approved by the WHO, is primarily because Chinese today have emerged as one of the biggest funders in the WHO, even surpassing the US for that matter. So as a result of which, obviously the Chinese are able to have their dominance, and as a result of which they are able to modulate the narrative that has been created here. So make sure that you study about the UN Bioweapons Convention, because a question on that in the preliminary exam or even in the mains exam is highly likely. So B1617 variant of the COVID-19, which has been designated by the WHO as a variant of concern. So here, friends, the very first thing that you need to obviously understand is that when is a virus called as a variant? So when, in what condition does a virus get designated as a variant? So you are aware of this basic fact that a virus is called as a variant when the genetic sequence of the virus basically differs from the parent virus. So in that case it becomes a variant. And then obviously the concept of mutations is something, friends, that you need to work upon. That what is a mutation of a virus? So the spread of the virus happens when the virus makes copies of itself. But these copies are not necessarily going to be the exact copies as like the parent virus. So some errors will occur when the virus replicates, and these errors are basically known as mutations. And thereby, in this regard, the third important thing that comes is what is variant of interest and variants of concern. So these are the two terminologies. So WHO will call a mutation as a variant of interest only when the virus mutates and causes an outbreak in individual countries. Are you getting it? So the WHO will call a mutation as a variant of interest when the virus mutates and causes outbreaks in individual countries. But it will be designated as a VOC, variant of concern, only when the mutation acquires a very dangerous character, which includes, higher transmissibility. Also at the same time causing higher death rate. And also at the same time having lack of vaccines or medicines to tackle it. So in this case it becomes what is called as a variant of concern. That you need to remember. Now apart from that, friends, you also need to very importantly remember here as a backward linkage, the Pan-India Genome Sequencing Initiative. So why do we do the genome sequencing? So that if there is any kind of mutation, we can identify that in advance. So a lot of samples are analyzed of the positive patients of a virus who are infected by a virus, and after that we are able to analyze, and based upon the analysis we are able to undertake genome sequencing. So please try to make sure that you study about that. And with respect to it, obviously you have to remember about the Indian SARS COVID Consortium on genome sequencing. So this body, which is responsible for carrying out the genome sequencing in India, also becomes an important specific backward linkage here. Now you are also aware of the fact that the B1167 is also known as a double mutant. So the concept of double mutant, उसके बारे में आपको अच्छे से पढ़ना है और उसके बारे में आपको नॉलेज होनी चाहिए. क्लास में हमने ऑलरेडी डिस्कस करा है कि डबल म्यूटेंट क्या होता है और जो ये इसमें जो प्रोटीन के स्पाइक्स होते हैं वो कैसे आते हैं और क्यों आते हैं, और वो कौन से वो स्पाइक प्रोटीन से E484Q और L45R मैंने आपको बताया था. एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंटली यू हैव टू रिमेंबर अनदर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग दैट द B1617 इज नॉट द ओनली double mutant here. So I just made this error, I'm sorry, I'm just rectifying that. So the B1617 is not the only, for that matter, the double mutant here. In fact, there are other variants that in other countries have been found. So you have to remember that there is also a UK variant. There is also a South African variant. And there is also a Brazilian variant. So we also have, apart from the Indian variants, these 3 other variants which are there in the world that have been variants of concern as of now. So they are very infectious. Specifically the Indian variant here, as the WHO has identified, is basically 2.6 times more infectious and responsible also for the second wave in India. So just keep that in mind, friends. Now the Atman AI and India's fight against COVID. So one important backward linkage here is firstly the concept of artificial intelligence. And when you study artificial intelligence in healthcare, मेंस के पर्सपेक्टिव के लिए इसको पढ़ लेना. मेंस में इस बार सवाल आने की बहुत उम्मीद है आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस इन हेल्थ केयर को लेके, कि व्हाट काइंड ऑफ issues are there with respect to the healthcare in the, and what role can the artificial intelligence play in that. Atman AI जो है वो एक टूल है which has been developed again by the DRDO. So DRDO के बारे में जैसे मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया, उसको अच्छे से आप पढ़िएगा, उसके बेसिक्स की नॉलेज आपको होनी चाहिए. So as I told you friends that the RT-PCR tests are not only costly and the CT scans are not available in all the geographies of the country. This Atman AI can be a boon in such areas. Why? Because it can undertake faster diagnostics and can detect the COVID infection in seconds. It also detects the severity of the infection from the radiological images of the lungs in multiple seconds only, and also very importantly tells the patient that whether the patient needs hospitalization or not. So in a country like India, as I told you again, where we are functioning on a very poor state of medical affairs and the health affairs, a tool like the Atman AI can be again a boon for the rural areas. So उसके बारे में आपको रूरल एरियाज, रूरल हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर जरूर ध्यान में रखिएगा. तो देखिए, जब हेल्थ केयर की बात होती है, मैंने आपको इंडिया ईयरबुक की क्लास में प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी एंड टर्शरी हेल्थ केयर बताया था. वो एक बार ज़रूर उसको वहाँ से रिवाइज कर लीजिएगा. प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी, टर्शरी में क्या अंतर होता है, कहाँ पे क्या फोकस है गवर्नमेंट का. अभी तक ये प्राइमरी सेकेंडरी क्यों फोकस था, अब कैसे वो टर्शरी में शिफ्ट हो रहा है. आयुष्मान भारत योजना जो गवर्नमेंट की है वो कैसे टर्शरी में उसको इम्प्रूव कर रही है. ये सब चीज़ें मैं आपको ऑलरेडी वहाँ पे बता चुका हूँ. बट फ्रेंड्स, जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट बैकवर्ड लिंकेज आता है इस पूरे ऑब्जेक्टिव, इस पूरे एरिया में, वो आता है हमारा नेशनल डिजिटल हेल्थ मिशन. सो ये जो नेशनल डिजिटल हेल्थ मिशन है, इसके जो बेसिकली ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हैं, लाइक द इस्टेब्लिशमेंट ऑफ स्टेट ऑफ आर्ट डिजिटल हेल्थ सिस्टम विच विल बी द कोर ऑफ द डिजिटल हेल्थ डेटा, द डिजिटल हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, ताकि एक सीमलेस एक्सचेंज का पूरा हो जाए इन हमारे पास मैकेनिज्म. सिमिलरली द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट ऑफ द नेशनल डिजिटल हेल्थ मिशन इज दैट इट एम्स टू एस्टैब्लिश द registries at appropriate levels to create a single source in respect of clinical establishment, healthcare professionals, drugs, pharmacies, etc. So यहाँ पर एक क्वेश्चन जो प्रीलिम्स के हवाले से अलावा जो मेंस में भी बन सकता है, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस इन हेल्थ केयर, तो वहाँ पे एक क्वेश्चन उसके रिलेटेड एक और जो बन पाएगा मेंस में, वो है रोल ऑफ जैम ट्रिनिटी in providing healthcare. So there are various unicorns, entrepreneurial companies which are today taking advantage of the tough times and providing very unique and innovative solutions. So these companies and how they can help in providing healthcare through the use of jam trinity in the rural areas. A broad question or an essay also for that matter on that could be asked. So keep in mind those issues. So these were the major things, friends, with respect to the science and technology part. In the next video, we shall continue with the other things which are there. Thank you.